see how they play out Sunday.
Wiz, it seems like Phillip holds onto the ball a little bit too long against Baltimore. Are you kind of trying to tell him, hey, throw it away, save it for another down, not get stuck in third and long, second and long, and have to keep on throwing the ball? Or you talk to him about that?
Well, I mean, we talk about a lot of things, but, it's not to make it too simple. He's probably one of the best in the business at knowing when to get rid of the ball and holding on to it to the last second, and he does a good job with that. And I think there's a fine line between trying to tell him to do something and, letting him play as a quarterback. I think that, we have a better feel for them now. And they're a physical group, and it's always a challenge when you play them. But so we'll have to be on our game for sure.
Yeah, picks on opening drives, 3 straight games. Combination of being too over-aggressive or breakdowns?
You know what? I think when you go back and you look at that, it's always one thing or another. It's probably one of those, a couple of different things. It's unfortunate. It's something that we got to stop. We can't have those kind of situations. So, we'd had tremendous success earlier in the season. If you think back to the London game, the first play was a touchdown on some of those things. So, when we've gotten into those situations, you can't just say it's always just the quarterback. I mean, it's a little bit in different situations on different guys, and we got to be able to make those plays. If you think back to the first game against Baltimore a couple weeks ago, I know it wasn't that long ago, the very first play was an interception. And yeah, the ball was a little bit underthrown, but we didn't do the greatest job in protection, and the receivers got to come back and break those things up. I mean, when you talk about doing those kind of things, making those kind of plays, there's always criteria that you stress with your team about, look, if we're going to do this, we can't turn the ball over, and this, and this has got to happen if this doesn't go right. So, like I said, you want to say, well, being over aggressive, or it's really more about you got to understand what you're trying to do, and everybody's got to execute what they're supposed to do. It's not ever, very seldom does it ever work out perfect exactly the way you want to. And we've got enough good players that they can make adjustments, and we can't let that happen. So it's something we've talked about, and it's definitely something that we can't afford to do, and that's what our goal is going into this game.
Beyond this game and the Ravens, how much more complicated is pass protection these days, just because of the formations that most people are using? You don't have 2 backs in the backfield very often anymore, and what are the problems that you have in protecting your quarterbacks also against these more athletic pass rushers?
Well, I mean, it's always a chess match, that's for sure. We do a thing here where we show some older clips of players who've played years past, and it's funny when you go back, like you said, this is what kind of struck this with me. You go back and you look at it, 2 backs in the backfield, the protection was a little bit different, but more like what you said as well, those guys that are coming are a lot different, and the schemes that teams are doing are a lot different. So, a lot of it is depending on your group and how they can communicate how you're doing things. It's always a risk-reward type thing when you do it, for the defense and for the offense. If they do some things like at the end of the Cleveland game where they went blitz 0, and they said something about it, yeah, it was effective, but if you hit a throw, in the right spot, and you make a play, then it can be a big play the other way. So protection is always a challenge in this league, and that's one of the things that, when you have a good center that can help control that, which Pouncey does for us, and a quarterback that's seen a lot of things, it's really more than anything about being on the same page with the group. But, there are times when physically you're going to get beat, just like, you're going to be successful physically sometimes. But the different moving pieces are tough, and one of the things that you try to do is give them different looks, give them different formations. Sometimes you're in max protection. Sometimes you're getting guys out with a quick throw. It's always a little bit of a chess match.
College backs is oriented toward pass protection and all those things as they used to be when you go out and scout them and draft them. And is that the hardest thing for those guys to learn when they get to the NFL?
Well, I think that because the NFL is such a different game, there's a lot of things that's hard for a lot of different players, just from a standpoint of, what they do. I think, and I'm not an expert, and I'm certainly not trying to make a statement about college football, but they're going fast, and they simplified things in college a lot. And when you come to this level, because of the ability of some of the athletes to do different things, you've got to put a lot more on the players to recognize and react to it. So I think young players coming into the league, especially, if it's a running back in protection, if it's a quarterback trying to understand those protections, those are always things that are tough. But look, it's tough to play in this league. That's why it's such a privilege to be a part of it. And you just got to work to try to continue to get a group that can communicate and handle those things.
Austin didn't play in the first matchup, and he's healthy for this one. How big a difference is to have him available?
Well, I've seen a couple of things where people said, yeah, we're definitely aware of Austin. So, I think from our perspective, it's tremendous. I mean, you just look at the game last week against Denver in the fourth quarter where he had that run that was big for us. Melvin's had a great year, and so has Austin. And when you have two good players there that can split the load or play at different points for you, yeah, it helps. It helps a lot. So, it's exciting to have Austin back for sure.
Two of Phil's highest rated playoff games has been when he's had 20 throws or less. Just playoff-wise, does that offense and balance in the running game stress more or more important in the postseason?
I think I've heard that before. A lot of times people say because of the weather conditions and those kind of things, it's harder to throw the ball in the playoffs. And I think back to our second game in 2013 when we went up to Denver, man, it was really windy and it was hard to throw the ball. So, yes, it's definitely an advantage to be able to run the football, but every game is different. Sometimes, especially if you have run-pass checks, sometimes they're not giving you the runs. And if you think that you can just run the ball in this league anytime you want, that's hard to do. Sometimes you have to throw it. I think, every game is different. And I think the game has evolved too. It's changing every year with what defenses are doing and their flexibility to do some things. So it's always a balance. If you just look at us, some games this year, we were really good running the football, and other games we weren't so much running it. But if you look at it in total, at the end of the year where they stand, it was a pretty good year for us running the football. So, and we won 12 games. So, yes, being able to run the football is important, and it does help. But there's going to be games where, you can't always rely on that. It's going to be a game where you have to throw for a lot and, maybe not run it as much. So it's always different, and you always try to keep that balance. One of the things Coach Lynn has stressed here is the run efficiency and being able to do that. And, our guys have done a good job with that. So we try to do it, but sometimes the game dictates that.
With their style of play, how important is it to put your stamp on the game right away?
What's that?
With their style of play, given that they hold on to the ball, they lead the league in time of possession, how important is it to really put your stamp on things right away?
Well, you always want to do that, especially when you're on the road, in a playoff game. And I think the most important thing for us, which we didn't do as good a job of in the last game, is make our plays. There was 3 first downs where we made the conversion, and those would have been big for us. Both of them were in scoring territory, would have gotten points out of it, and if you think back to the game, that would have made a huge difference. So, and I think one of the things we haven't talked about is turnovers. We've been really good earlier in the season, and we've had a couple the last few weeks. Part of those has been interceptions, so we've got to cut those out. When you're playing a team like this, and if your possessions are going to be limited, then you've got to take advantage of those possessions.
No matter if or how Hunter plays on Sunday, does it help to force the Ravens to prepare for him?
I don't know if it helps anything with the Ravens. I don't know. I'm not in their building and understand what they're doing. Do I know for us? Yeah, for us, he's a good player. Even after not having played the whole season, seeing him out there on the field, working into some things, making some plays, he's a good football player, and you want to have as many of those guys as you can.
Is it a tough line to toe, especially with a guy like that? Obviously, you want him to be a part of the offense in a game that's so important, but at the same time, he hasn't played all season. You think you have to work him back in slowly? I don't know. Is it
Well, yeah, I mean, we're not going to just roll the ball out there and say, hey, go, Hunter, right? So, I mean, there's a little bit of working him back into it. And, to his credit, he's worked very hard. And he's been on the field the last couple of weeks working back into it. So, that's always a good thing.
Do you feel different energy for playoff football? Some of the guys have been in the playoff game. Or do you rely on guys like Russell Okung who have won a Super Bowl?
Well, I think you always rely on the players that have been in the playoffs to help with the other guys. But you can talk about it all you want. It's a different animal, and it's awesome that we're in it, and our guys are excited about it. We've had pretty good energy the whole year, and I think that's the reason why we had such a successful regular season. But it's different in the playoffs, and it's a new world for some of them, but it's exciting. I mean, it's good to have some veterans that have been in it that can talk to the young guys, and that certainly can help.
Liz, if Henry is active, what are realistic expectations for him, being that no offseason work, no training camp, really has to play?
Well, 60, 70 plays maybe. Every special team rep. We may even use them on defense. We may even use them on defense some. So, I don't know. I think some of it's how he feels. I mean, you'll have a certain number of packages, plays that you'll use him for, and I think you kind of go from there.
I know you, like you said, you're not in the Ravens building, but as an offensive coordinator, how much do you kind of appreciate what they were able to do in the middle of the season, basically changing their whole thing when they went to the new quarterback?
Coach Harbaugh's a good football coach. I've known him for a number of years back in the days when I was at Pittsburgh and he was in Philadelphia, and they do a good job. I mean, they've done that. So credit to them for what they've done. And they're a good football team. Defensively, they do a tremendous job. So we've got our work cut out for us. But we're excited. We're excited to play them. It's the playoffs. That hadn't happened around here in a few years, and we're looking forward to it.
Going back to the turnovers, you said limiting them. Phillip having 6 in the last 3 games, does that kind of concern you going into the playoffs, or do you know that he'll make the necessary adjustments to not have them?
Well, if I knew a lot of things, that would make it a lot easier. But I think Phillip had a tremendous regular season. He played really well and did a lot of good things for us. This isn't his first rodeo per se going into the playoffs, and Phillip's a tremendous player. He'll do just fine.
When you were in Pittsburgh in 05, you had to go on the road 3 straight weeks to get to the Super Bowl. Just off that experience, how much of a challenge is that?
Well, how many teams have done it since then? I think just maybe one other one, or it's not easy. But the one thing I'll say for us, and it doesn't mean anything about this game, is we went on the road this year a lot into some pretty tough places, and our guys handled that well. So does that mean it's going to be that way in Baltimore? I don't know, but I do know this. I know our guys are hardened to a certain degree about playing in tough spots in Seattle, in Kansas City, in Pittsburgh, and being down and being able to come back and win those games. That can help, I guess, as much as anything is prepare you for it.
Just with the prime time games in Pittsburgh and Kansas City, did it have a little bit of a playoff or postseason?
Sure it did. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. That's what we said. It feels that way, just from the standpoint of all the people on the sideline. Holy cow, we went to Pittsburgh, and seemed like 1,000 people down there on the field. So, which that's what it's going to feel like Sunday in Baltimore. So, yeah, from that standpoint, it does. No, you could do that for me. Thanks, guys.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Here, like opponent, we just faced the Ravens a couple weeks ago, but very challenging. I think everybody understands that. This team has put together enough games now, the last 6 or 7 games, with Jackson at quarterback.
You go up against them again.
Well, I think it probably works both ways. I think that they understand us too, so I think that it was just a couple of weeks ago, some of the things, obviously you look at changing game plans and doing some different things. So there's some new things that we have to do defensively. But just the style of the running backs, the style of the quarterbacks, the style of the receivers, the offensive line, the style they want to play, that is pretty fresh in our guys' minds.
Guys, how much of a concern do you have at linebacker? I mean, missing 2 starters, a little bit undersized there, preparing a running team.
Right. I think each week what we do is we look at all of our players, and like a Jaleel and a Derwin James, they're interchangeable. At linebacker we've had that. We moved AP there, but now guys like Kyle Manuel, Hayes Pollard, they got to step up. And last week they did. Hayes had to go in there and play linebacker for us, and did a good job for us. So we'll have to take a look at that next guy's got to come up and play at a high level. And I think it was a good experience for those guys last week. So, I'd like to see Hayes and Kyle and those guys getting more opportunities.
How do you prepare for the tight end? It seems like they're one of the teams that use the tight end heavily in their offense, like Mark Andrews. How do you kind of prepare?
He is. I think he's the one that, when it was all said and done, really jumped out at us. His athleticism, he's playing at a high level. I think there's, between him and Jackson, there's a consistency, a trust with those two. So, but they're just playing at a high level right now. I think they've got so many threats. Their tight end group is very good, very talented. They utilize all of them. And, we're going to have great awareness where those guys are.
Going back to Andrews, since that seemed to kind of be the play of the game, was that a play breakdown where he kind of split the safeties there?
Yeah, we just didn't execute. We were a little bit late on recognition, and, they had a big play.
How would you assess Casey Hayward's play this year?
You know what? I think stats-wise, probably interceptions and things like that, that's not showing up. But I know we went through the personnel again this week with all of our players, and we feel like he's playing at a high level.
Gus, Derwin's numbers really stand out, but just for a rookie now playing in his 17th game, where do you feel like he's condition-wise and sense any?
He's pretty good. I've been impressed by all of our rookies. They've really, because at times you see where the wall hits, but his spirit, his energy, it's unbelievable, and it continues. And now we're into this second season, and, great energy level.
Because your defense is always energetic, you mentioned, but do you sense a little more excited with the playoffs and letting these guys first taste of it?
Well, I think they've been pretty focused throughout the year, but there does seem a little bit more, attention to detail and being on it. But they've really been a group that communicates well together, even in practice. And so those parts I'm seeing are pretty consistent.
Gus, this week the Ravens are having to prepare for Hunter Henry, even though they don't know what's going to come from him. As a defensive coordinator, what's it like to prepare for a player? You don't know what exactly he's going to do like that. And I guess for you, how do you kind of prepare for that?
Well, I mean, there's some unknowns, right? So I think you got to go back and look at when he did play, and how they utilized him, and did the offense change? He's a different type of player, so I can only go off if another team had that situation. We'd go back and watch film and see how they utilize him, if there's anything different that shows up.
Is it tough to blitz a team that has like the guys like Marshall Yonda and Ronnie Stanley and the two sides?
Yeah, I think the threat of blitzing is with a team like this because of the style of offense they have. Obviously, there's times you got to bring pressure to try and make some big plays, but they can. You see it on tape where teams bring pressure, and next thing you know, there's a long run. So I think you got to pick and choose your times. But you need to get pressure on him. Push the pocket, because if he can extend the play or if he gets out of the pocket, when his yardage is up, that's a bad thing for us.
How much are you emphasizing staying in your rush lane? Because there were times where you guys got to him quick and then he just made some.
Right. Yeah, and that has showed up every week. I think whenever you're facing a quarterback like this, that's a big emphasis in the room.
Is Brandon Reed in practice today?
No, he's not.
Coach Lamar Jackson and Gus Edwards have combined for over 1,200 rush yards since week 11. It's an extra back plus a quarterback who can improvise all in one. How do you combat that? What are the other challenges?
It's challenging, because the running backs are very good. And anytime that you have the quarterback with the ability to keep it, it creates an extra gap. So it's like, okay, what do we do? Do we take the middle third safety out of the hole? Do we take both safeties out of the hole? How do we combat this? And that's the challenge with their offense. And what we've seen, even since we played them, or the past 2 weeks or so, the number of quarterback runs has gone up. Where it was some bellies and things like that to the tailback, but the numbers that he's carrying the ball has jumped up. So, we anticipate a little bit more of that probably in the playoffs, too, as well.
Do you kind of tell your players not to? It seems like in the first game they hesitated while going up to get Lamar. They would stop and maybe see what he was going to do? Do you kind of tell them to go off their instinct, or?
Yeah, you know what? I think there's a such thing as a good missed tackle. As long as you go fast with proper leverage, you know, sometimes there's a place for that rather than breaking down, sitting in a chair and let them have a two-way go on you. So we try to play fast, you know, and we don't want good missed tackles, but if they show up with the right leverage, and it's more of that mindset with him that we have to play fast with him and try to eat up the grass.
Something like 7 of the top 11 teams, including you guys, that blitz the least are in the playoffs. I mean, does that just show that teams are finding more effective ways to get pressure without rushing 5 or not gambling?
It's an interesting stat. I did not know that. I think it really depends on what your front is. And we feel pretty good about our front, you know, with Joey and Melvin and D Square and JJ and Phylon, those guys. We feel like there's times when we can get pressure with them if the quarterback allows us or the style of pass allows us. So I think based on that, there's times I think a little bit maybe earlier in the season we brought a little bit more pressure in games. But ideally, if you can get pressure with 4, that's ideal. Okay, thank you.